Some people know what they want to do with their lives from a very early age. As a 7-year-old girl, Betty Churcher was begging her parents to take her to the National Gallery of Queensland again and again and again. She'd found a painting which she loved, which inspired her, and Betty Churcher has spent more than 7 decades inspiring others now to share her passion. A graduate of the Royal College of Art in London, she's been a teacher, an art gallery director, not just any art gallery director, director of the National Gallery, a TV presenter and an author. But in 2003, Betty Churcher came to the devastating realisation that her eyesight was failing her. 3 years later, she headed to Europe to commit all of her favourite artworks to memory before her eyesight deteriorated further. Now she's written a book about that experience. It's called Notebooks. And Betty Churcher joins us in our breakfast studio. Betty Churcher, welcome to breakfast.
Nice to be here, Fran.
Betty Churcher, the window to art and beauty is most often through our eyes. When you realised your sight was failing, what did that mean for your life with art?
I just felt, well, for my life, never mind my life with art, I felt devastated to the point that I thought, well, I don't want to go on. I can't live without sight. Because it's not just looking at pictures, it's looking at the landscape around me. We're in this lovely spot outside Canberra on the Yass River, and it's, watching the season change. But books are my mainstay. Not being able to read a book, I thought, was terrible. And fortunately, it hasn't come to that. It's been kept at bay.
How much sight do you have now? 25%, is it?
About 25%. I've got none in this right eye. That had the melanoma. But this one has the macular degeneration. And as long as I'm brave enough to keep having those dreadful injections that go straight into the eyeball, I'll be all right.
And as I say, your failing art was the inspiration for this project, and we'll get to that in just a moment.
Yeah.
But I was interested, you write an essay, an introduction to the book, where you basically chart your life and your love of art and how that's led to your life being dedicated to an involvement in art one way or another, pretty much. And you start as a little girl. Age 7, you discovered art, but before then, you knew you could draw, and you thought everybody could draw. In fact, you thought to see was to be able to draw.
Yes, I just thought it was a natural part where we could hear, we could see, we could draw. And it was only at school when children said to me, I can't draw. And I thought, goodness me, are you blind? And then, no, they obviously weren't blind. And then it began to dawn on me that, perhaps this was something, a gift.
So you really
and that's all it is, really, just a gift.
So you really thought when someone said to you, I can't draw, that they must have been blind?
I thought they were blind, and I was looking for other signs of blindness, when of course there were none.
And we must go to that moment as a 7-year-old when your parents took you to the Queensland Art Gallery. You were just transported by one particular painting. Tell us about that painting.
Yes, it's funny, isn't it? I look at it now and I wonder what on earth entranced me, but because it's not the sort of painting I go for now, but it was something a bit like a magic carpet. I'd always loved books because they moved you to another place in another time. But this picture was like a magic carpet. I just zoomed off into Victorian Cornwall and in the 19th century and just became part of that life. And I just wanted to keep stepping back into that world. And,
it's an unusual response for a 7-year-old, isn't it?
I suppose it is, yes, because I think now at that height, my eye level would have been about level with the street where they were hanging it, where the autumn leaves. It was full of Victorian pathos.
It was a painting called Evicted by Blandford Fletcher, in case anyone listening knows it.
Yeah.
And you're not so enamoured with it now.
No, it's quite a nice picture. It's the first picture the Queensland Gallery bought. But it's got beautiful grey tonalities. I can see what seduced me. But what really seduced me, I think, was the fact that it was another life in another place that I could participate in.
In the end, art took you to another life in another place. It took you to London, but not before, as a 21-year-old, I think it was, or as a student anyway, you went to Victoria and you looked at real art. You saw a Rembrandt and you cried.
I always laugh at that. Yes, I had tears streaming down my face because I thought I was looking into the eyes of the great man himself. And it's since been discredited by the Rembrandt research. Yes. Well, I don't know what it was. Ernst van Vettering, who is a Rembrandt specialist, and he was on that Rembrandt review, He's told me since that the canvas that picture's painted on comes from the same bolt of linen as other great late Rembrandts. So it's obviously from Rembrandt's studio. It may be a painting that he started and never finished. It may be not a self-portrait, it might be a portrait that one of his students painted of him. I really don't know, but I do know it's not a Rembrandt.
Whatever it was, it moved you to tears.
It moved me to tears simply because I thought I'd come face to face with the person I'd been admiring for some years.
You headed off to London. I mean, most of us know Betty Churcher as an art critic, as a gallery director, or the director of the National Gallery, the woman who brought many of those great blockbuster art shows to our lives. But what we didn't know, perhaps many of us didn't know, was that you were a very, very fine artist, drawer and painter. You won awards in London at the art school.
Oh, I won every prize I was going. But you see, Fran, being a brilliant student doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be brilliant in that career. There's another thing that has to come in. When you cease to be a student, you've got to... I think talent, like the talent that I undoubtedly had, took me quickly to the bottom of the mountain. But the mountain you've got to scale yourself, and that's what beat me.
Well, did it beat you, or did you give up? When was the point? I mean, you talk about motherhood being a part of this. When was the point you knew you were loaded with talent, but you weren't going to be great? Was there a moment?
Yes, I think there was. But the children coming in quick succession, of course, hurried that decision along. Perhaps if I hadn't had children, I would have struggled over that first hump and kept on going up. But I don't know. But I don't regret it. I've had a wonderful life and wonderful children.
You're listening to ABC Radio National Breakfast. Our guest this morning is Betty Churcher, who has indeed had a wonderful life, and she's written about it in a new book called Notebooks, which is more than just a story of Betty Churcher's life, and it does go through your experiences and how you became a curator pretty late in life to end up directing the National Gallery. But this book is dedicated or springs from, inspired by your capacity as a drawer. And what a great talent you have is to be able to look at a painting and then you can draw it. And you draw it so well, so finely. This is an experience you put into practice when you realised you were losing your sight. You decided, I've got to go back and see all the artworks again. Tell us about that decision and what you did. Well,
what happened when I thought I was in danger of losing my sight? I'd lost the sight in one eye and then the other eye started to fail, and I thought, oh dear, oh dear. And then I realised to my horror that when I tried to pull up some of those pictures that I most loved from student days, the Rembrandts and the Velasquez and the Manets, etc., I couldn't accurately remember them. I thought, if I'm blind, I can't pull them up in their complete state. And so that's what I went back to do, to fix them in my memory for all time.
And how did you do that?
Just by drawing. And I was terribly lucky. I don't know who did it. Somebody got me a pass to stay in at the National Gallery. I'd be there all day. And then at 5 o'clock when everybody left, I could stay on. I stayed on till 10. And I had the National Gallery to myself. It was absolute bliss.
How many days and evenings did you spend there sketching?
Oh, that went on for probably about a fortnight with one security guard. And I said, oh, I'm sorry about you having to stay back. He said, don't be silly. He said, I'm getting overtime. I love it.
And it wasn't just the National Gallery. You travelled through galleries across Europe, didn't you?
Yes. Well, a lot of the drawings in that book come from the days when I was a gallery director. And often I was drawing a painting really just to remember where it was in case I wanted to borrow it.
So the thing with you is that if you draw it, you remember it now.
Once drawn, never forgotten. I could almost draw them for you now if I needed to.
This is a reference book, really. I think it's become for people who are interested in some of the great works and travelling around the world looking at them. You help us see them in a different way, not just by the things you accentuate in your drawings, but in your descriptions of them.
Well, it's the two together that I'm hoping that people will sort of look at paintings that are quite well known and perhaps see them in a new light.
Let me just read a little bit from a description of a painting called The Baptism of Christ by Piero della Francesca. And you say, you note the art of the catechism pulling his shirt over his head is echoed in the arc of the arm of John the Baptist. Piero's mathematical thesis on the force of lines and angles can be applied to the lines of force in this picture. He used the golden section, which is a mathematical proportion. He believed that numbers had a metaphysical meaning. I mean, just reading that, we look completely differently at different details of the art.
Yes, that picture, it's a magical picture. But that can be analysed with geometry as worked out. He thought that somehow with numbers and with proportions and with ratios, he could discover the wonder of creation. And I think that was why he was a very religious man. But in the 15th century, his thesis on maths was better known than his paintings. Not now. It's his paintings that triumph.
It's called Notebooks. It's not quite pocket size, but it is a good size for a kit bag if you are travelling around the world to look at the great works. Was that done on purpose for that reason?
Yeah, well, MUP insisted on that side. I was begging them to make it bigger, wrongly. I think they were absolutely right. I think it's perfect size. I was afraid that some of the paintings wouldn't look so good. But what they've done, I said, well, if you're going to reduce a big painting down to that size, I must have a detail of it so people can see I wanted them to see the way the paint had been applied, you know, the texture of the canvas and all of those things.
Well, some things you just have to go to and see in person. You
Actually,
can see the
you're
paintings
right.
just fine. You can see your drawings. They're beautiful as well. Just finally, Betty Churcher, when you close your eyes today, what is the painting that comes to your mind first above others?
Oh, I just did it. The one that did come shot into my head then was that wonderful drawing that Rembrandt, a painting that Rembrandt made in 1655 of his new love, Heinrich Stoffels. Well, we think it's Heinrich Stoffels, bathing shin deep in a river. And she's holding her shift up. She's got a little cotton shift and she's holding that shift up and feeling her way through the water. And I love it.
Betty Churcher, when she closes her eyes, she thinks of Rembrandt. Betty, thank you very much for joining us on Breakfast.
Thanks, Fran.